Hello, Oblivion fans. Today, my good friend Matt and I, we are breaking down what our experience as Skyrim players has been like trying to survive in Oblivion. Like, our goal is to roll credits on Oblivion in 2024. And to be quite honest, it's more tough than a Skyrim player maybe would like to admit. And we've been making these videos having these discussions. And so I'm a nerd with this stuff. I love to go back in time, find old interviews, find old conversations, old forums. And so I have a little bit of an advantage on Matt, where he's kind of just playing this game raw, experiencing it, and using this podcast as a way to discuss. So I'm going to share some core concepts with Matt here about Oblivion and what I've been able to glean with my research as far as how do you survive as a Skyrim player in Oblivion. I think I've honed in on a couple things, and as we've had these discussions on Tactically Sound, we've been able to talk about them a little bit, so there's a couple themes that I want to just drill down to, and then Matt, I want to hear your take on if you think these tips are going to help you get to that next level, because you kind of hit a wall with the difficulty spike. So let's get into it. So first of all, specializing our characters. We're going to talk about that. Should you go more specialized? Should you go more broad? And then we're going to talk about enemy scaling. Like, what is the deal with that? If you look up Oblivion scaling, you'll see tons of threads and forums discussing why people like it, why people don't like it. A lot of the people in our comments from the clip that we posted last week really enjoy Oblivion, and that's really reassuring because I've been liking it too. And even the enemy scaling doesn't seem as bad as I initially thought, but that doesn't mean that the conversation isn't pretty critical if you're coming from a different Elder Scrolls game. Mm-hmm. And then the other component that I want to talk about is surviving these dungeon dives. These quests will often send you from dungeon to dungeon. I think like most Oblivion or most Elder Scrolls games, you're going to get a quest and they're going to tell you to go somewhere. So I have a couple tips on that. And then also we're going to talk about the guards, because last time we were talking about quests and specifically guild quest lines. And Matt was saying how he was trying to become a thief and he failed his thief initiation. No, it wasn't thief. It was Dark Brotherhood. I had to kill people in a mission. I'm like, this is perfect to join the Dark Brotherhood, but it didn't go so well. Yeah, so we're going to talk about some solutions for that. So this is kind of like Oblivion therapy for Skyrim players. And yeah, I have some little annotations from the Prima Guide, which is a really cool resource. They sell these big Prima books, and they have these tips and tricks. So we're going to pull some stuff from that. But so let's get into our first one, specializing our characters. Matt, you've mentioned on this podcast, as we've been playing Oblivion, that you've gone specialized, and that's had some positives and some negatives. So let's just touch on your experience. For those of you who are watching for the first time, Matt, tell us what your build is specialized in, and some of the positives and some of the negatives.
So I specialize, I first started off going, I need to, be fast, and I also need to be a melee character. So I need strength or endurance, speed, and gosh, I can't remember the last one I picked. Or
there's so many skills. The skills that you could level up are a ton.
But what I've been doubling down on is speed, because I've noticed in this game there's no sprint, and gosh, that's where I am definitely reaping the benefits of modern gaming. This takes me back to games like Halo, and back then we didn't notice that we needed sprint, and maybe this mechanic fit better at the time. But for me, it's been such a headache trying to deal with how fast I am, and it makes me feel clunkier, which is funny because I find the combat melee-wise very smooth and articulate and flashy and fun. So maybe I don't know how I should properly build a melee character. So maybe in the comments you guys might have suggestions. I'm looking for speed and I'm looking for strength, and I want to survive.
Have you tried hotkeying a dagger? That was something I was reading in the Prima guide, is that the one cool thing about a dagger is just how quick it is. And like, if you're in a tight corner, especially if you're playing with athleticism, the lightness and the speed of a dagger, especially what they've been saying, is if you utilize sneak. So you get that first hit as sneak damage with the dagger, but then you also poison the dagger with like health damage or burden, or I believe the other one that they said would be really cool is paralyze. And this is a trick that young Morrowind lover Spencer would use all the time is paralyze. And I've yet to find any kind of alchemy or any kind of like potion or any kind of spell that allows me to paralyze. So I wonder if it's like a more rare trait in Oblivion, or if I've just happened to miss it somehow. But I think you should play with like using potions and alchemy with your weapons, because the tight corners of these dungeons, like, have you gotten jumped where you're like crammed in a tight space and you're trying to swing and your fatigue goes down and like they're stunning you basically?
Yes, that is so annoying. I was fighting some zombies in a dungeon and they just started swarming me. And of course I had to find a little tiny corner where I can start cheesing them and survive, but it gets crazy.
It does. No, I feel for you. Recently, I was trying to catch some thieves in a fighters guild quest, and there was 3 of them. And 3 is kind of the magic number with Oblivion, where it seems like, you know, for instance, my next arena quest is to go against like 3 dark elves, I believe. And so I'm thinking of, you know, how do I utilize my summoning? Because I've mentioned this before, but my build is built around conjuration, athleticism, speechcraft, destruction. But also I'm using sword. I kind of feel like I'm not the specialized character. I'm specialized in my desires for how I want my character to feel, but I don't know if that counts as like, oh, this is a proper build that everyone does. I think it's really specific to me, and like I expect to be able to conjure like I believe they're called scramps, like conjure one of those dudes, and then maybe pull out my bow, poison it, shoot some elven arrows, and then get my sword that is enchanted with shock and go after them. And so like I kind of need all my tools at my disposal. And I pulled a rough paraphrase. I was listening to Ken Rolstein, who's the lead designer for Morrowind and Oblivion, originally from like tabletop backgrounds, but his general take was that Oblivion's open-ended design is like designed to be broken. He would much rather that a player feel immersed to kind of like try all these different playstyles than feel like you're being forced down one specific path. But the Prima guide kind of says be wary of that. Like, you don't want to be the jack of all trades in this instance. I think you want to use all the tools at your disposal. But you know, we'll get more into this, but essentially, you know, let's kind of transition into enemy scaling. As you're getting more difficult enemies, you need to make sure that you're choosing the right weapons. Like, you need to have a strong relationship with your weapons. And so, Matt, like, have you been able to find any weapons that have been difference makers, or do you think that loot is still something you're seeking after?
Definitely feel like in terms of just general variety, I've been just trying to like play around with different weapons. Like I was messing around with the dagger, like you said, but it just didn't feel like it had good reach. And while I found that the two-handed weapons I was finding has awesome reach, and I had more of those opportunities to protect myself behind an object and cheese a little bit. This game is harder than Skyrim, and what's funny is I thought Skyrim was hard when it first came out. Now I'm playing Skyrim again, having such an easier time with it. And you know, after playing games like Baldur's Gate 3, other RPGs, playing Dungeons and Dragons in real life, like I feel like my mind is open. Like I got my third eye now where I can like kind of see how to think through those things, but yet I have not adopted that brain to Oblivion, because I'd never thought Bethesda was that deep in a way. But I'm feeling like Oblivion's a little bit deeper. It's more like a true RPG where I can actually think logistically through the situation, the encounter I'm having, instead of just simplify like, like caveman. I am the caveman build. Unga bunga, hit things. You know, like what's the playthrough in Fallout when you have all the luck and not super smart?
Like the dumb playthrough? Like, Tim Kaine, the designer, does that. Yeah.
Yes, like that's usually like my when I'm a strength build, that's usually like kind of like what I go for. But this game is a lot more intricate and demands a little bit more thought put into it, which is interesting. And yeah, I need to have some of more of that tactically sound brain, if you know what I'm saying, Spencer.
Right. I think you're the more proper gamer. If we were like brothers, I would be one of the guys bringing in the cool games, be like, Matt, you got to check out Quake 2. But also, can you beat it for me? And can I watch? You know, like you're the proper gamer. But I think I have the leg up when it comes to Bethesda, and like the type of problem solving is just so specific that like, if you're coming in mostly from Skyrim, maybe you've played Fallout 4, maybe you've played New Vegas, and you go to Oblivion, that's almost not enough information. And I also have the advantage where, you know, my friends grew up with Morrowind with me, and some of them have gone back to Morrowind as adults. And showed me, you know, the first 2 hours being like, okay, here's the mage guild. You need to become a mage. You need to get this ingredients. You need to use this potion. You need to do this. And just realizing, like you're saying, a Bethesda game is actually deeper than some of you guys may realize if you've only played Skyrim or Fallout 4.
Or remember. I didn't remember it. I never remembered Skyrim being that deep. It was cool. And maybe it's in a weird way, more of like the first game as an introduction. It was good as an introduction, but now playing other games like Baldur's Gate 3 and just, whoa, I've never played a Baldur's Gate game like before. I've never done Dungeons & Dragons. I didn't know that games are able to have this level of complex gameplay and replay value, and I'm discovering it all in Oblivion, which is crazy because this game's old. Well, now it is.
Yeah, I know. It's like I did a podcast episode with my friend Hans, and it was about his guitar amp from 1977, and he posted on the story saying like, "Oh, my amp is vintage, and so am I." And I'm realizing that with Oblivion, it's like, you know, we were probably going into high school, maybe junior high when this game came out. For some people, they played this game when they were in their 30s or when they were in their 20s. We're all kind of coming at it from a different angle. But what I firmly believe is that a game is a game. Like, I could play Oblivion now, and I think I'm going to get pretty close to the same experience that someone else had as a kid, just because I like to tune out all the noise, and it's kind of like a book. It's like one of my favorite authors, Kurt Vonnegut. It's like I'll read his book from the 60s, and I swear it was written today. It's like resonating on so many levels, from a language perspective, from the dark humor, from the commentary, and I'm just like, wow. So something that is made with like passion, it can carry through, and someone who's coming at it from a new angle, yes, there might be some of those difficulties that you're encountering, but if you keep at it, I really do think your other skills of modern gaming are going to start making more sense as you see the numbers and like you see what's happening behind the scenes, because they're really good at hiding some of that behind the scenes numbers that are happening. And so real quick, I want to mention a comment. They were reacting to our clip of the podcast where Matt is admitting that he's slowly falling for Oblivion. Now, he still lays in bed at night with Skyrim, but like Oblivion is catching his eye a little bit.
Why are you telling him this? Why are you telling him this?
So yeah, like you're falling for it, and a lot of Oblivion players are coming out in full force, telling us that like it's worth it to cross over to the dark side. And someone said, this is Zachary Soares, 1985. He said, to me, Oblivion was a superior game to Skyrim. Everything from the quests, side quests, magic spells. The only thing Skyrim has, graphics and better combat system where you can have 2 weapons on you. And then, you know, I responded back, and then he was like, oh, also, he says, combat mid-air is beautiful. Not going to lie, that the first time I played Skyrim back in the day, and when I jumped in the air and couldn't use my bow and arrow, I was just like, oh my. He says, yeah, you'll miss the acrobatics, jumping from house to house, rooftops. It's satisfying. And that goes back to, I think, what Ken really talked about as the lead designer. He was like, I would love to have my team. We'd all be working on stuff at a crazy pace, and almost all of us are breaking the game. And he was like, that's the fun of it, is like failing and having fun in your failure, knowing you're going to hit the edge of the map, like knowing that when you switch from third person to first person, it breaks the immersion. You can't control the camera angle. So it's just like, boom, now you're like at a very specific distance from your character. And that's what I love about the Elder Scrolls developers is, you know, they're coming from tabletop RPGs. They're really, he even mentioned how his love of Daggerfall and Arena, it might have been just Daggerfall specifically that he was mentioning this, but he said, I loved all the books. Like, that's what's badass to me about a game, is like all the books. And so I think as like Skyrim players going to Oblivion, or Oblivion players going to Skyrim, there's going to be those differences. We're going to be cheering for our different Elder Scrolls titles. Right. But it's a richer conversation because we're playing Oblivion. Like, now we will be able to test Skyrim, like, oh, I kind of do miss the acrobatics. I always show off to Mo, like my little elf dude, just roaming through the tall blades of glass, like leaping in the air, floating like an astronaut in Starfield. And I'm always like, dude, this is sick. Like, I feel like a badass who's like low-key kind of flying as I traverse Cyrodiil. But let's go ahead and dive even deeper into this discussion of enemy level scaling, because you can't talk about Oblivion without talking about enemy scaling. So the unofficial Elder Scroll pages have a quick little blurb just saying leveling is fundamental aspect of gameplay in Oblivion. As the player's character grows stronger, the rest of the game world also becomes more powerful. This page describes the leveled lists that are used to implement changes in the world. Details of the character's level are provided. So this is what I was talking about, Matt, is like you can get some background level information on the leveling system. It's almost like these are Pokemon. Like, there are numbers happening behind the scenes. There are creatures that are lower leveled, creatures that are higher leveled, and there are a lot of rules to the gameplay systems behind the scenes. So if you do find yourself struggling against a specific creature, you can use the Prima Guide, or you can use unofficial Elder Scrolls to see. Like, I ran into a boat, like a derelict boat, and I got jumped by a bunch of wraiths, and I was like, dude, they're like taking down my fatigue and my endurance, and like I can't use my normal weapons on them. So I was like, this is one of those quests that I'm gonna have to come back to. And I was looking through the Prima Guide, and I was able to see like, okay, those were probably level 13 creatures, and I'm level, I think I just turned 13, but also I need to go in with the right potions. It kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy in this way. Like, I need to go in with the right potions to combat what these creatures are doing to me, like whether it's silence or burden, whatever they're using, I need to have the answer to that. Right. What are some examples? You mentioned the zombies. What are some other examples where you're like, I'm trying to solve this puzzle, I got jumped by this creature? You know, you mentioned that you feel slower than the enemies. You wish you had sprint. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Well, as you were talking, actually, it came to mind. I don't know if anyone else had this thought, but you're telling me like this game scales with level. You know, there's tons of games where people they stay at level 1 the whole game, right? And it's like a level 1 challenge. So like, do people do level 1 playthroughs of Oblivion where they just never level, and like everything still stays like that same difficulty, but like you're saying, like the gameplay comes more into like the RPG mechanics of like, I'm gonna bring these XYZ potions, I'm gonna have XYZ spells to engage their weaknesses, and I'm gonna use these tactics in the 3D space in the setting to get advantages on these enemies. So part of me is like, do I go and just level up, or what's the incentive to level up? How good are these melee skills that I'm missing out on? And wait, do the melee skills come with the level up, or I thought I just got them from just fighting? I don't know.
Yeah, I do think, especially on your first playthrough, I mean, we're both kind of counting this as our first real playthrough. We've started over a couple times.
Very
it doesn't really count
playthrough for me.
Right. We never went really past the tutorial. For me, this was really helpful from the Prima guide, so I'm going to answer your question with this. They write, in general, creatures are not level 2 you. If you see an ancient ghost, you know that it is level 9 and it has 170 hit points, no matter if you counter it at level 9 or at level 29. Instead, the game provides you with the challenge by pulling creatures from leveled lists as you rise in level. You will encounter higher level creatures, although you will continue to see lower level creatures as well. The exceptions to that rule are the top level creatures of each creature type, which increase in strength with you to continue to provide a challenge for your high level character. Quest specific creatures are also leveled. These are noted in the creature tables. And I've also seen that you're kind of incentivized. I've learned this from Tim Kaine talking about the Outer Worlds. You're kind of incentivized to visit stuff early, because when you go see a creature, you kind of print their level. I was reading in Prima Guide that I think that's kind of the case, where it's like, so if you visit this really hard town and you're level 1 and they're level 12, like when you come back, they're still going to be level 12 as long as you've interacted with them. So you're kind of like pissing on the tree in a little bit, like going, visiting, making sure that you're not saving certain regions for these crazy high difficulties. Don't quote me if that's wrong. That was the general vibe I was getting. But also it makes sense, because like what they said about, lower level creatures are kind of always lower level creatures. Like rats, I seem to be like one-shotting them now, and they like comedically fly. I was able to take down like one of those green like trolls way easier now than I did initially. And it seems like once I got to level 13, that was a big change. And probably because I kind of like reached a general like cap above what a lot of these like more common creatures are. So I don't think they're quite leveling. And since they're not quest creatures, as I'm just traveling from town to town, like I'm able to handle them way easier. So I do think the game gets easier as you level up. But you will of course run into
so much more sense now to me. So how I understand it is, you are, given the first set of enemies in the beginning. These are the low level enemies. You're gonna get stronger, and then eventually the enemy scaling works as they're going to send you new enemies, like a minotaur or whatever, that is at that higher level, that's going to do that greater damage in the future when you finally hit that level, that appropriate level that cues that character to come out, or that enemy to come out.
Yeah, and I think also you got to look out for the ranks. Like you'll see qualifiers next to the names where it'll be like Goblin Skirmisher or Goblin Battle Mage, and those higher ranked kind of lieutenants and captains and whatever. Those higher level
people though. What about like is it easier for you to murder someone?
Yeah, because
so
I'm able
Dark
to
Brotherhood
finally
easier.
Right. I think you might want to revisit Dark Brotherhood after you've done some Mages Guild and Fighters Guild and Arena. So that way you're a little bit more leveled up. I think that would, and especially if you met a lot of these people from town to town, just buying stuff from them. I always try to like persuade people as I meet them. So when I come back, like my disposition is pretty high. But yeah, so you want to make sure that you like, I find like oscillating between these guilds is really helpful. It's like when I know I'm going to walk into a trap, I'm like, okay, let's start at Fighters Guild, level that up, because you're going to find new gear, you're going to learn new tricks, you're going to see new parts of town, you're going to make more allies and friends, and I think that all helps. So let's talk.
I need a companion. Oh my gosh. I wonder how many companions there are in this game, because there's a lot in Skyrim.
Yeah, that would be a cool episode. Like, try to figure out that companion question that you have, and then like experience the companions if there are companions. That would be a good episode to do.
Yeah, because you say in your combat you use summons, and that's been really helpful for you.
Yes.
Yeah. See, all this is good, Spencer. Thank you for this guide, because now I think I'm going to have an easier time at not just like playing the game, but like thinking through the game.
Right. Yeah, and what's funny, as you said that, is I don't remember which of these developers, but one of the developers of Oblivion mentioned that he would just summon a scamp when he would get lonely. So he would be like walking from town to town and not see anyone, so he just summon a scamp to keep it next to him. And it's also my favorite kind of companion as well is the scamp. He's like, they're just not as scary as a zombie or a skeleton or a ghost. They kind of are like these little creatures. And he was saying that they wish that they could have made it so you could summon a dog, which would have been really cool and also a cool mod. So let's talk now tips for surviving these dungeon dives. It's a common Bethesda thing. We talked about this a little bit. Yes. So, the main question to ask yourself is, does your main weapon match your build, which I mentioned earlier at the top? And then also, how often do you repair your weapons? So they even mentioned in this Prima guide, which I thought was an interesting tip. I've never heard of this before. Maybe you guys do this in other Bethesda games, including this one, but they say that you could hotkey your repair tools. So you're like always repairing your tools, your weapons as you're in a dungeon. And I do repair often, but I don't do it to the extent where I have it hotkeyed.
No.
Like I've never really thought of that.
That is amazing. Oh my gosh, I have never thought of that either, to hotkey it, but that like makes so much sense because I was constantly opening up my menu just to find my repair tools. And I thought I dropped my weapon. Honestly, I was fighting some monsters in the Oblivion Gate, and then all of a sudden I didn't have a tool, and like this dark mage came out of nowhere, and I was just getting wrecked. And then I was like, "What's happening?" And then I realized, oh, I gotta repair weapons in this game. Oh, and then I went through my inventory, saw I had a couple. Because I just, I know to collect everything. So I was okay after there. But to hotkey it, that's another level of genius.
Yeah, these Prima guides are sick. Like I love these types of tips, especially because like they're from the era, so it's like you don't know if people still use that technique. I like that kind of like level of like immersion where you're reading something from a guide writer who probably played this before the game came out, like a couple months, and really had to dig in to figure out how to beat the game and how to give people tips. And then they say, do you incorporate potions and alchemy? Like another thing I learned from the Prima guide, which I know, but it's always great to get that reinforcement. It's like that older brother kind of reaffirming your strategy, being like, are you picking up plants and using the appropriate ones when you're in a dungeon? They talk about that. I mentioned this to you already, so we don't need to go into it, but using the potions against enemies, like putting poison on your blade, making sure you get that sneak damage. All of that is really crucial. And then not just going dungeon to dungeon, like making sure that you're replenishing your stocks before you go into that next dungeon dive, because they were like, you will get murdered if you're just going dungeon to dungeon. Like you have to make sure you have the right potions and the right equipment. A big one for me is recharging my main sword that has that magical ability, that like charge spell on it, because when I know I have a tough battle, I'm like, I'm gonna go refill that charge at the Mages Guild, pay for someone. And the next step for me is to figure out if that's like a soul stone thing that I can then recharge my own weapons. I need to figure out what I need to do to recharge my own weapons, because it's kind of expensive. It's like 1,200 gold to recharge my special sword. Yeah. What? It's a little lavish. But I'm telling you like luxury. One shot, like sometimes 1, 2, 3 shot, like really key enemies, and you'll be glad that you recharged the magical part of the weapon.
Is Odessa rolling in that dough?
Yes, right now. My goal is to get to 5,000 because I want to buy a house. So I always try to roll around with like 1,000 to 2,000 doing these quests, the Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, Arena quests. They pay decently. You do like 3 or 4 and you get to 1,000 pretty quickly. But then, you replenish your weapons, you get more potions, and it's expensive. That's why I'm putting so much time and effort in my speechcraft so I can haggle and bring their prices down and try and get some kind of advantage. Right. And you got to pick your berries and all your alchemy so you can hopefully not have to pay for these potions. So let's real quick listen to Michael Ryan. This is from IGN. Michael Ryan is a Bethesda developer talking about some of his favorite moments from Oblivion. And he said, he's a level designer and dungeon builder. He said, one of my most memorable moments involves something that happened to another developer here, actually. He was playing through a dungeon and was very low on health when he stumbled across some goblins that began chasing him. Out of potions and close to death, he heard a war cry and turned to investigate. Suddenly, one of the orc adventurers bursts into the room and slaughters the goblins, saving the player's life. That definitely made my day. And that's that like Radiant AI. Like the Radiant AI system is so powerful, and that's kind of why I want to show it off, because it responds to your question about like how are these guards knowing when I steal something? I'm trying to make it further in this quest by stealing or by killing someone, and I get reported right away or someone catches me. So I'm going to kind of talk through some of these developer memories, because it does reveal stuff about the game that even they didn't know. So Jonah Loeb, who's a popular Bethesda developer, he was a character artist on Oblivion, he said, I was in Fort Wariel prowling my Khajiit through the dank probably dark corridors when I hear footsteps in the hallway ahead of me. From around the bend, an airy green light spills across the stones and grows nearer. Frantically searching for a place to hide, I back into a corner, trying to wedge myself into some broken masonry. A marauder warlord turns the corner, bathed in that unsettling green illumination. Unable to retreat from the light, my cover was broken and he charged me, wielding a mace. After a long and grueling fight, I managed to put him down and recover the source of the light, his magic Daedric shield. I put it in my pack, bring it back to my home. I owned a manor in Skingrad and put it on my mantelpiece. So I think that kind of talks to the level of difficulty for even the developers, which it's like the Marauder Warlord. That's the rank up. So you know, like at any level, you're going to have a difficulty if you're far in a dungeon going against a human or a creature that is like the higher level rank. And then also the gear. The gear matters too. So we'll talk now more about those pesky guards. So they have what's called like high responsibility. When a witness sees you, that's a stat that the Bethesda developers could program into an NPC. So I believe it was like officials, nobles, they have a high responsibility. So if they see you committing a crime, they're going to report it really quickly. Some NPCs have a low responsibility. And so depending on who the witness to your crime is, depends on how quickly they are to raise the alarm. If there's guards in the region, a guard could be hunting and then stop hunting to go investigate. There's all this behind the scene NPC activity. Another trick that I believe I picked up from the Prima guide was like before you confront the guard, drop your items somewhere, like not right at your feet, but somewhere else, so that way you could come back. If you drop it right at the feet, they'll steal it from you and put it in a lockbox in the prison that's hard to steal from. But if you like, before you confront them, run around, drop it, and then come back to them, then your equipment will still be there. So this programmer said this was from Orin Trezhnok. He said, not long after I started at Bethesda, I was working on the miscellaneous statistics menu, and so I was going around committing crimes to see if they tallied properly. I got arrested by a guard and went to jail, and shortly after I was released, I passed the very same guard who turned toward me and frowned at me silently. I got a little chill. It was a little thing, but it felt so creepily real. So again, that goes back to like how impressive this AI is.
Yeah.
Right? On Hopgood, a programmer, said, earlier in the project when I was working on flee and alarm behavior, I put an unarmored NPC in the test room with me and I attacked her. I expected she would flee to the outside, send an alarm, and look for a guard. I hit her. She runs out the door and I stand there waiting for a guard. Instead, she comes back running back in with a huge warhammer and proceeds to kill me in one blow. That same morning, I had implemented the search for weapons stuff and had forgotten. Joel Burgess, another popular Skyrim and Oblivion designer, said, I was on the roads one morning, heading west from an inn near Anvil. Slowly the sky grows red as I realize I'm approaching an Oblivion gate. It popped up near the road, just down a steep hill, and Daedra were already swarming. As I get closer, I see an abandoned horse ahead. I jumped off my steed to run for the gate, joining an Imperial Legion patrolman already engaged with the enemy. The battle was epic, and we saved each other more than once. We walked up the hill after the battle, and he paused at the edge of the road, turning towards the blazing, fiery gate. He looked over his shoulder at me and said to me, do you think we stand a chance? Whoa. I reminded myself that the whole event was unscripted and the line was chosen randomly, but I couldn't help feeling genuine kinship with this NPC. So good.
So good.
This Fighters Guild one?
That's amazing. That's really amazing to having those moments in a game. And this is why I wanted to even mod my Skyrim to have AI integration with the NPCs, because I want more moments like that. You're telling me I don't need to mod my game to have those kind of moments? I just need to play Oblivion?
Right. Guy Carver. So I did this quest just recently. He says, I did a Fighters Guild quest to deliver some weapons. I had 3 guys helping me clean out the goblins, but 2 of them were overly rambunctious. They ran ahead and got themselves killed. I saved the last guy because he stuck with me. Well, anyways, I went back to the Imperial City and some guys started talking in a bar and commented on how the mission went wrong and 2 guys were dead. That actually angered me and I wanted to tell them to shut up because it was the 2 guys' own damn fault for getting themselves killed. So like, yeah, the world reactivity, you know, with the AI is really cool too. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, the gist of what we wanted to discuss. Just surviving, learning more about the AI, how to use it to your advantage. It sounds like, don't be too hard on yourself, Matt. Like even these developers rely on luck and random events to bail them out of sketchy situations. Whether it's running into like a tough marauder or dealing with an Oblivion gate. It's like, you know, kind of engaging NPCs. That happened to me. Like an NPC was at the wrong place at the wrong time and she got caught in a bad situation. She ended up dying, but she did take a couple like tough enemies with her. And I was just like, hey, that's kind of the Bethesda way. Like, I'm sorry that you got involved in this situation, but honestly, you saved my life, and I'm grateful for your sacrifice. But any parting thoughts now that you've learned a little bit more about surviving Oblivion as a Skyrim player?
I think my tactics are going to get a little bit more sound after this one. I needed this episode, Spencer, and I know I'm not the only one. I might have the most shame to admit it, but I'll gladly do that for you guys. Get behind me. Yeah, I'm really excited to get back in the game and kind of explore maybe a little bit more arena, maybe try to level up a little bit more, do some more Fighters Guild quests that I've been working on, get some more gear, and then hopefully I'll be able to pivot into Dark Brotherhood a little bit. But again, the more I play this game, I'm realizing it's kind of like a true RPG, similar to what I play at Baldur's Gate, where you kind of go in with an idea of your play style, right? And so we shall see if that Dark Brotherhood ends up unfolding for me. I definitely have to get stronger, and I definitely feel like after this, I have a better idea how to play this game, at least from a combat side of things.
I love that, and we'll just before we leave throw some, some positive feedback about Oblivion. Someone said, this game was my childhood. If you look past the graphics, it's an absolute masterpiece. I think the graphics add to the charm for sure. Someone said, when I first played it, I definitely wasn't a fan of the graphics, but graphics be damned, Oblivion is my favorite entry in the series. Someone else, this is Eon Silver 88, said, started playing last Thursday for the first time and can't stop. So I love that people are playing it for the first time too. It's like we have these veterans of Oblivion who are encouraging us or making fun of us, and then we have like these new like recruits who are entering the Oblivion world for the first time.
Let's go.
Yeah, someone said it looks goofy and weird, but hot damn does it have fantastic quests and themes. So yeah, it's exciting to see people jumping back in and talking about it. And thank you guys for tuning in and watching. Don't forget to subscribe here to the Yetti Den, and also to subscribe to my co-host, Matt.
JumbyJumbwa. Follow me at JumbyJumbwa on YouTube. JumbyJumbwa. We're gonna get down and have some real good fun over there. I like modding Game Boys, but I also want to get into more playing some actual games, maybe some video essay kind of things. I've been working on some things behind the scenes, and I do want to roll them out. So I want to hear what you guys want to see. Check out my videos that are already posted. Check out my shorts. You can see my reels. Same name, JumbyJumbwa, on Instagram as well. I'll see you guys there. Thank you so much for watching.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Let us know what you thought of today's episode. Throw out some tips, because Lord knows we need them. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.